Welcome to the DAGERSystem channel, and we're here today to talk about Outriders, the new looter shooter RPG from People Can Fly. In this video, I'm going to take you through the settings and options. You can see everything that the game has to offer right now at release, and you get a little bit of an insight into the settings that I use when I played Outriders. Then I'm going to be talking about the core mechanics of Outriders and how it scores based on visual, auditory, and fine motor accessibility scores. So if you're looking to see how accessible Outriders is at launch, this is where you want to be. Let's roll right into it. Starting off in gameplay, you have sprint mode and aiming down the sights to be both toggles or hold. You can turn on or off the auto set maximum world tier. So if you want the difficulty to go automatically up and progress each level, you want that on. For auto loot minimum rarity, you have common, uncommon, rare, epic, and legendary. Whatever you set that to, it will automatically loot that rarity and above. Further on down, you can turn on the text language, subtitles, enable crossplay, cinematic camera smoothing, which allows the camera to not be so jumping and shaky during cinematics. Onto audio, various audio sliders for master dialogue, sound effects. Going on to the HUD, you can customize what you want on the HUD by turning these on or off. Make sure you want to scroll down because you can change the scaling from anywhere from, it starts at 1. Can you go down to 0.5? Yeah, 0.5 all the way to 2. This only affects the in-game hub when you're not in menus or inventory. On to controls for keyboard and mouse. Various settings for mouse sensitivity, as well as my favorite, the double press to dodge roll on the movement keys. Then here are the key bindings. You have primary and secondary binding. So you have 2 different options you can choose from, but be careful because some keys may not be able to be rebound to certain other keys. You're going to do a lot of testing and configuring to make sure what playstyle works for you. Under controller, same thing, but these you cannot change. You can only swap the sticks or the triggers, but everything else cannot be customizable. You have vibration and aim assist down below here. Make sure you scroll down and look at everything. On to accessibility, you have large fonts on or off. This is with it off, and this is with it on. Not very much difference. I wish there was a bigger and larger fonts than they are right now. High contrast mode adds the black, which we have on right now. If you turn it off, it goes gray, but black makes it look more cleaner and easier to read. Descriptive Subtitles is the closed captioning mode. Subtitle speaker names, and then the 3 main colorblind modes were the 3 main colorblinds. Before we do get started, I highly recommend checking out the demo for this game. Your progress progresses into the release if you end up buying the game, and it's a good way to kind of see if you're able to play it, if you couldn't really tell from watching this video. So I highly recommend playing the demo before you buy the full game. Now, since I did play the demo, I ended up carrying over my progress from my character where I played the Devastator, which is kind of the tank class. And I played with the setting to auto increase my world tier, which made it each time I progress and gain experience and completed different levels, my difficulty would go up. I think I'm on like 5 or 6 world tier right now, but you can turn that on or off or change the world tier at any time. And most of the combat is through checkpoints. So you progress through a different story and through a checkpoint each time. And so if you fail a checkpoint or you fail a mission in part, you'll just start right back up at the beginning of that mission. It can be kind of frustrating if you get down to like the last few enemies and you die. You have to do the whole thing over again, but I do kind of like the checkpoint system and how it progresses you through the game. Now first, let's start with the fine motor accessibility in Outriders. A few of the highlights are toggles for both sprinting and aiming down the sights, as well as the double tap movement key to be able to do the dodge roll. I really love that feature because it allows me to double press the movement key to dodge instead of having to press either 2 inputs or another input altogether to dodge out of way enemies. I can just continuously dodge roll by double pressing forward, back, left, or right. So I really love that feature. I wish more RPG shooters would implement it. Outriders also includes removable controls for keyboard and mouse, but not controller. And for those players that use keyboard and mouse, some of the key bindings don't really work and cannot be changed as they're kind of hard-coded. Like I like to use delete and page down, page up, insert, and home because they're right above my arrow keys. And some of those could not be rebound to some of the skills I like to use for them because they're hard-coded to other events in the game. So you're going to have to do a lot of trial and error and get the right key binding set up for your playstyle. Another thing I found difficult was having to hold the button down for interacts. So if you want to mine out some iron in the side of a mountain, or choose a reward for an item, or even choose the dialogue option when you're talking to NPCs. All those require holding the input for a duration of time, anywhere between a half a second to a full second. And it's longer for mining out the iron, but it was definitely difficult for me, and it's something to be aware of. I wish there was a toggle option for that, so it would be easier. I just press the button and it does the whole loop around of the interact. And with all that being said, I give Outriders fine mobility score, partially accessible, or 2 stars. Moving on to visual accessibility of Outriders, I really like that there's different icons and pictures and art for all the different mods and buffs and debuffs that you get as you play through Outriders. You can really easily tell what different buff or what different mod you're doing based on the picture or what's happening on your screen. And when you play through each different level in combat, they do highlight your enemies with a little red arrow. It is red and it shows like an arrow, so you can see them above cover if they're ducking below cover. So it makes it really easy to kind of tell where the enemies are. Also, if you get hit by bullets or enemy damage, you'll see around your reticle that you'll have a red arrow that kind of shows the direction of where the damage is coming from. Though I do wish your center reticle, when you're not aiming down the sights, was customizable, because it's like a little gray dot and it can be really hard to see where you're looking at or where you're aiming, and I always miss to the right or left of enemies because I can't see where my center of my screen is. Outriders does offer an option to change the fonts from normal to large fonts. I kind of really hope that maybe the large would be a lot bigger, and there's a lot of text on the screen when you're going through your inventory and customizing your build and all the damage numbers that you have to deal with in your build to figure out the right build for your character. And one feature I really liked was the quest tracker. If you press the button, it kind of shoots out a wisp in front of you and highlights the path to your next checkpoint. It's really cool. Sometimes it kind of messes up a little bit depending upon your location and the quest you're on, and kind of puts you in a dead end, but most of the time it works pretty well, and I really enjoyed that feature. It will help direct players into where they need to go for the next objective. But in the end, I'm still giving my visual score of Outriders partially accessible, or 2 stars. Now lastly, moving on to auditory accessibility of Outriders. The game does offer various volume sliders to customize the sound, as well as settings for subtitles and closed captioning. Now the closed captioning only really triggers during cutscenes, even though the enemies that you're fighting do kind of say dialogue and taunt you a little bit and say things when they die and explode, but that doesn't really get picked up by the subtitles or the closed captioning. So you kind of lose the immersion of playing if you're deaf or hard of hearing. When you do use your abilities as your character, there are some audio cues that kind of trigger when you plan your combos on your enemies, and it must trigger a buff for you depending upon what ability you did use. So you kind of miss out there as well if you're deaf or hard of hearing, because there isn't really a visual cue that triggers that same concept. And just like the last 2 categories, I have to give the auditory score of Outriders partially accessible, or 2 stars. Well, in the end, Outriders isn't the most accessible looter shooter RPG out there, but it does some things really well and does some things leaving you shaking your head. Hopefully in time and with future patches, we can get some more feedback in to the developers and get some of these things fixed and make the game even more accessible. Leave a comment below if you have any other questions on the accessibility in Outriders, or if you found anything that I might have missed. I want to hear about it. And if you're looking for more accessibility reviews on all the latest video game releases, make sure to subscribe to the channel. That way we can continue to make gaming enabled.